let's start by bringing our awareness back to our bodies. You don't even have to change posture, but just notice how it is now. Is there literally a party like outside the front door?
I'm really curious.
Yeah, is it just somebody standing on the corner with a boombox? I made a joke with Juliana. I was like, maybe it's somebody from Howie's Tuesday night group. Like a competing Dharma group that meets on Tuesday night. I mean, not competing, like we're all for, but wouldn't that be funny if they're like, yo, go out there on a Monday night with a boombox?
Dharma pranks.
Dharma punk.
Yeah.
It really is right outside, huh? Are they going to turn it up now?
I think they're upstairs neighbor. But his girlfriend's out there. She's going to let him know.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Hey, sometimes it's like this. So, although actually, what's funny is it works perfectly with what I was going to talk about tonight. It really does. And what I wanted to talk about was the Buddhist teaching on the second arrow. Actually, that's what it's called. It's a simile of the second arrow. Sometimes it's translated as second dart. But that's silly. It should be second arrow. And what it is you guys know this? Have you guys heard of this one? Some of you have, some of you haven't. So I'll give you the teaching itself, and then we'll talk about it, and I'll explain how it relates to the music. So what the Buddha said was that he was talking about the difference between an enlightened person or enlightened being and an unenlightened person. And he was saying, well, suppose you have an enlightened person and an unenlightened person riding their horse or whatever. I guess, yeah, horse at the time. And they get shot by an arrow. Like, some evil person shoots them with an arrow. And he says, the thing is that an enlightened person, or an enlightened being rather, it's not like they have magical powers. It's not like, but the arrow bounced off their enlightened force field. It's not like that at all. His point is like, no. If you shoot an enlightened person with an arrow, like, yeah, you'll hit him with an arrow. That's real. But he said the difference is whereas for the enlightened person, it just is what it is. Like they got shot by this arrow, and it just is what it is. The unenlightened person's mind then goes off on this whole thing about like, oh my God, who shot me? What the fuck? Like, I gotta get revenge. You're like, oh no, like I can't believe this is happening. Like, what did I do to deserve this? Or and on and on and on. And the Buddhist point was that in doing that, the unenlightened person is effectively shooting themselves with a second arrow. And so it's not a question of, if you're enlightened, you'll never get shot by arrow. It's a question of, do you want to get shot by one arrow or two? And really more like, or three or four or five, you're like, oh, because I think actually once you start practicing, it can get even worse, because you're like, oh my God, why did I get shot? What's going on? And then like, oh no, I'm not practicing well because I'm shooting myself with a second arrow. Oh, I'm a terrible Buddhist. I'm not. And it's like, yeah, you got your third arrow, maybe your fourth arrow. This is why I think the translation, I've seen it as arrow, but I've also seen it as dart, which is silly. Like, what are you like, hey, and I was out playing darts with my friends, and somebody, threw a dart in my back. I thought it was funny. Anyways, so this is the teaching, is to see how our own minds actually makes whatever is happening significantly worse. And I was noticing it with the music. It was actually, it was kind of funny that it was happening. I was like, oh, this is right. I'm watching it right now, because I'm like, okay, it is what it is. It's some music, some sound. And for a while I was like, because it kept going, I was like, should I go tell them to stop? And it was funny. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. What the fuck? And I was like, hey, check it out, you're doing it. You're shooting yourself with the second arrow right now. And I even thought, I was like, well, should I maybe go out there and say something? And it was a great lesson in that, because I thought, that will be more disturbing than the music. Like if I go out there and I'm walking up and down and opening and closing the door and like maybe arguing with somebody outside. I was like, no man, I think that will be a lot worse. Just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. So, so does this make sense? Kind of the, and the reason I actually wanted to talk about it tonight is because when I got here earlier, I just wasn't feeling well. I mean, I'm still feeling kind of off. Both like, I don't know if like my lunch is disagreeing with me or seasonal stuff or the holidays. I just kind of don't feel good. And there's a real art form in this practice. Like, I think of it as like the art form of feeling bad. Come on in. Yeah, like it's kind of, there's a real art to it of how to feel bad well. And it's this second arrow thing. So, often when we feel bad, it's like, well, there's whatever's happening. Maybe physically don't feel well, emotionally, whatever. It is what it is. But then comes that second and third and fourth arrow, right? Like, oh my God, why don't I feel well? What's wrong? I can't believe it. Like, what did I eat or didn't eat? Or or you ever feel bad about something you think you shouldn't be feeling bad about? Right? It's like, I shouldn't even be feeling bad about it. I'm like, but I've been practicing for years. I can't believe I'm still attached to this or that. And so there's a real kind of art to just accepting it and being like, okay, well, this is just what's happening now. And I think I've shared this here before. I like to go down this kind of checklist. I just drop in and I just sense what's happening now. I'm like, well, how is it really? Like, I have all these stories, but what's really happening? Like, well, I feel kind of a weakness a little bit. It's kind of maybe even a bit of a sadness. And I like to go down this checklist. I always like to do that. I go first, I'm like, okay, am I going to die? Like, no, I'm not going to die. And somehow that's always a big relief for me. If I just cross that one off the list, I'm like, oh, well, if I'm not going to die, well, that's not so bad, really. And then, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to die. I got that going for me, which is nice. And then I'm like, all right. And then I look at the stories, like what's associated with it. Because it's usually a kind of flutter of, oh, it's because of this thing or that thing, or I should have, or they should have, or like, so there's a lot of thoughts and stories. And then, like I was saying during the sit, then like I go, oh wow, I don't have to think about this right now. I don't actually have to dwell on it. Like I can actually put that down and just come back to my body in this experience. And then in the moment, just in this directness, it's really not that bad. It really lacks all this kind of drama and all this like agitation around it. Because a lot of times that agitation and that second arrow, it comes from this like not wanting to accept that this is happening. It's like, well, how do I fix this? It's like, I wasn't planning on feeling bad tonight. I was actually really planning on feeling good tonight. As opposed to those other nights. I'm like, no. I was expecting to feel good. And so there's this way that's like, well, I'm trying to wiggle out of it. I'm trying to, hold on, can I think of something? Can I figure something out? Can I, like, make some plan? Can I, and it's all in this way of trying to reject this experience. And labeling that this experience is wrong. And I want to talk to the management. I want to see if I can get my money back and get a better experience. And this is exactly the second arrow that the Buddha is talking about, right? Where he says the enlightened person, keeps saying enlightened, it should really be enlightened being. But for enlightened being gets shot by there, and it just like is what it is. You know, and it might be very painful, it might be terrible, they might die, but it just is what it is. There isn't all this like second and third and fourth layers of like neurotic angst. And it's funny, I notice that when I'm feeling bad, there's like the second arrows, it's pretty predictable. I find one of the most typical ones I watch is this sense like, oh no, this is gonna last forever. Oh man, like now I'm just gonna feel shitty forever. You know, and that's much worse. And then there's a kind of, I say this because it's kind of good to get to know these arrows. Because as you get, if you get to know them, it's kind of like, oh right, that's you're always that arrow. That's that voice that always says that. And another one is like, there's some version of kind of like, what did I do wrong? You know that one? Like, somehow there's this myth that if I did everything right, I would always feel great. Like always. Which is, we know that's not possible. So if I'm not feeling right, it's like, well, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? How can I fix that? And then I think another one is like, well, what did they do wrong? You know, whoever, if it's not my fault, then who else's fault is it? And again, these are all ways of not being with the first arrow, not being with the original experience of just this. And we know, the Buddha says it's 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows, right? There's the 8 worldly winds. The Buddha says that in any human life it consists of these 8 worldly winds. So it's pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and praise and blame. Doesn't that kind of cover it? Let's sum it all up. And so the idea is like, look, this is just how it is. If you're a human being, you know, I guess another way to say is, you know, you win some, you lose some. This is kind of how it is. But we really don't like that. We don't like that side of it. So we're engaged in this never-ending debate, or kind of, this, like, how do I get out of that? How do I get out of that? How do I beat this system? Actually, I think many of us, I know I for sure came to this practice as a way to really outsmart the system. Like, well, I'm going to learn to meditate, I'm going to get enlightened, and then I'll feel good all the time. And I find that that hasn't been the case, sadly. But what I do find is that it's not about not feeling bad, but it is often about not feeling bad about feeling bad. Because when you look at it closely, which is worse? Is it when you feel bad, is it that you feel bad, or is it that you feel bad about feeling bad? And that's what the second arrow is. That's what he means by that. I mean, that's another way to say it. And I noticed that when I just stop fighting it and just allow it, and to use this phrase that one of our main teachers, Ajahn Sumedho, made really popular, of, right now it's like this. That's kind of one of his main mantras, which is no matter what's happening, it's like, right now it's like this. This is just what's happening now. It really puts it into perspective. And suddenly it's not this epic saga of why, will I feel bad forever and what did I do wrong? But it's like, it's just whatever. You don't feel so good right now. And then what's nice is you can actually, the other thing that's really nice is that once you're free of this debate and kind of trying to figure out how you can get out of it or what happened or whose fault it is, what's nice is then your heart's actually freed up just to have compassion. And you can actually have compassion for the fact that you're feeling bad, which actually feels nice. And often we're so busy with all this, second arrow stuff, that we're too busy and caught up in that to just feel the natural compassion that arises when we acknowledge our own suffering. Because suffering is just part of the deal. It's the first noble truth. Suffering is just part of life sometimes. For us and for those around us. And when we're not busy arguing with it, we soften up, and there's a kind of compassion that we have for our own suffering and for the suffering of those around us. And it kind of has this effect also of bringing us closer to everyone, because we realize, oh yeah, we all suffer. Whereas the second arrow fixation is very self-centered, right? And I'm not even saying that critically, but it just has that, oh, what's wrong? What did I do? Or what they do? But there's a way that it's like very separate. It's like, oh no, me and my unique suffering. Whereas this other way, you see it as like, oh right, this is just part of the human condition. This is actually something I share with people. And I'm assuming, I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but I'm assuming I'm not the only one in the room that feels off tonight. And by seeing that suffering is not that something that's unique to me, because I fucked up somehow or somebody did something to me, then I instantly feel that. Like I don't even know which one of you don't feel it, but I know some of you don't feel well tonight. I'm like, oh, we're feeling the same thing. Right? Because suffering is suffering. I mean, whatever, our particular circumstance might be different, but what is it? I mean, it's, right? It's, I don't know, it's pleasure or pain or gain or loss, fame, disrepute, praise and blame, right? And then there's like nothing is wrong. There's nothing to fix. It's just something to be with. It's just something to embrace. And it deepens this sense of love with one's own being and with the beings around us. Because, it doesn't take a lot of love when everything's going well. Like if you're exactly the way you want to be and you're feeling awesome and everything right, and you're like, I love myself. It's like, well, yeah, because you feel great. Or like, oh, I love my partner. It's like, or like, I love life. It's like, well, yeah, because you're just getting what you want. I mean, that's just common sense. You're like, I love this. It's like, yeah, it's fantastic. But where love really comes into play is when it's not so good. Like loving yourself when you don't feel good, right? But loving others when they don't feel good. Loving life when it's actually painful. That's when the love is really necessary. That's when the love and the compassion is what makes it bearable. That's when we really need the softened, compassionate heart. How does this sound? Any questions or comments? I'm curious how it's resonating with you. Anybody? Oh, thank you. Very sweet.
I think my second arrow is ruminating over things, whether it's something emotional or something tangible, a work problem.
Yeah.
I'll find before I resolve it, I've gone back to it in my mind 10 times.
Yeah.
And that's like my second arrow. I shoot myself over and over again. I catch myself saying, why are you thinking about this right now?
Yeah. You know what I find helpful with that is that it's funny. What we can group into the first arrow is actually large. So in this case, like when I watch that happen, if I see that happening and I can bring myself back, because sometimes I just see it, and like I said during the sit, sometimes I'll have this like, I'll just say no thank you. Because I literally sometimes will experience it. If you get used to kind of watching your thoughts, you can start to really see your thoughts as not something you're thinking, but something that's just in the mind. And it can actually, when you really see it clearly, it's actually pretty similar like to if you were sitting there meditating and I came up and was like, hey, do you want to think about this? You know? And that's kind of how it is. When you pay attention, you're just sitting there. And I almost feel like it's like these guys at like at a market, like a bazaar, you know, with like items, and they're going, hey, you want to trip on this? You want to think about this? Like, hey, you want to get really upset about this? And I find like if I can see it clearly, I can be like, oh, no, thank you. And like I said, it can be actually very liberating to be like, oh, wow, I have a choice. Like, I just don't have to think about that. But then there are other times where as much as you try to do it, like, you just are caught. You know? Like, you're just in it, and no matter how much you try to do that, it's like they got you. And then I actually find that you can make that the first arrow, meaning like, all right, well, I guess I'm caught in this, and I can't stop thinking about it. All right, sometimes it's like that. You know, because in that case, then that becomes like the first arrow, and the second arrow is like, why can't I stop thinking about it? So there's a way that the line at which you draw the acceptance can actually expand and expand. I've had times, I mean, I've been really down and really having a hard. I remember one of the most liberating things I ever had experienced. Maybe it was when I was at the monastery. And man, I was practicing and trying hard and all of this stuff. And there was this period of time where I was just miserable. And no matter what I did, like I would do these practices and those practices. And I remember having this moment where I just saw all these ways I was trying. I had this moment where I was like, oh, okay, I'm absolutely screwed. Like, no matter what I do, I can't get out of this. And I remember it was actually, not to get too dark on you guys, I was in a pretty dark place. And I had this meditation where I was like, oh, okay, I'm just in hell right now. Like, that's cool. I just live in hell right now. And I was like, yeah, dude, that's it. It doesn't matter. You went all the way to Thailand and became a monk and you're still miserable. Like, I think that's it, man. There's not much else left. And I was like, okay, well, fuck it. I guess I just lose. I'm screwed. There's nothing I can do. And I remember the moment I just said that and like admitted it, there was this strange peace that came over me. You know, it was like, okay, well, I give up then. And then it was back to just, okay, all right, well, I guess I live in hell. I don't know what happened, but somehow I wound up in hell. All right, well. I was like, well, how is it? It's not that bad, actually. Like, I was like, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought hell would be. Maybe a fairly light form of hell. Like, that's cool. And I got all these people around me. You know, we're all wearing these robes. I was like, and it was such a relief because I was done. Like the self-improvement project was over. And I was just like, cool, I resigned. Like I lost. It was great. I was like, yeah, that self-improvement project was a complete failure. And now, like, it was great. I was like, hey, what else can I do with my life? So do you know what I mean? So when you really can't get out of it, you can have compassion for that. Where you're like, wow, I just can't get out of it. I'm just getting my ass kicked right now. Cool. I guess that's how it is now. And then again, because I noticed that once you stop fighting it, that's when the compassion arrives. Because while you're fighting it, it's like, in the fighting it, it's like we haven't accepted that this is really happening. Like I still maybe can kind of get out of it and maybe, like, well, if I maybe do this. And so that's kind of like, well, no, I haven't admitted that this is really happening. And then it's hard, you can't really have compassion if you haven't even admitted that it's happening. You see what I mean? So, and that's actually a lot of times what blocks us from having compassion, is we don't want to feel the pain of it, which actually prevents the compassion from arising. No?
Yeah, on an emotional level for me, having compassion for myself, like if I'm having a shit day, it's not too hard for me to just kind of imagine myself saying, yeah, dude, that sucks. And imagining how that would feel. So I can be compassionate with myself on an emotional level. I don't find that particularly challenging, but on a physical level, I'm having a low trouble being compassionate there. And I don't know how closely one relates to the other, or what can be tweaked, or if that's like an ongoing challenge.
So like a physical, like an injury or physical in the body kind of thing? Huh. And you find that harder?
Significantly.
Say more, because actually, I mean, I'm not challenging
Sure.
it, because for me it's almost the opposite somehow.
Yeah.
Again, it's just how we get our conditioning. Because to me it's kind of like, well, if it's physical, I have for me, I have less thoughts that I could fix it. It's somehow, for me, it's easier to accept the physical. Like the emotional, my mind is such that I'm like, no, I could somehow heal this or figure it out or solve it. But if it's an injury, it's like, well, yeah, that's what it is. So I'm really curious, like, help me experience it from your point of view.
Well, for me, being miserable, I've got a lot of practice with that. So I've got a lot of compassion. So, because I know so many synonyms for bad, I can find it very easy to be compassionate to other people. So I have a lot of practice empathizing with and being empathetic towards different kinds of emotional suffering in different degrees and whatnot. So I have a lot of practice feeling that for other people, so I don't have much trouble feeling that for myself, even if it's a problem that I created or whatever. On a physical level, though, I don't know. Just just this. I've got a pinch over my neck for 15 months at this point, and it's really, really painful sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Other days it's okay, and I can feel myself coping with it by wanting to blame my employer for putting me in a position, which is just me not wanting to take responsibility for asking to not, be in that position. And then I blame myself for not trying to get out of it, but then I try to be compassionate. It's like, well, you didn't feel you had any other options, so I can feel myself playing the blame game with both, with the people that I feel are responsible, both me and other parties. And I can feel that just seems like the ego, playing its last few cards, really trying to save itself. But it's really hard, just to sit and just this constant pain. And I can feel it permeating other things because, my spine is with me everywhere I go. And, in its bits and pieces. And I can feel it shortening my temper here and there. And I struggle with that, but also just just constant pain is really tough for me.
God, I'm sorry, man. That sounds terrible. It's interesting when I hear you describe it, I'm struck that that's not physical; it's still emotional.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Because yes, you're right. There is a pinched nerve, and that's the physical part.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're describing, actually, pain is an interesting thing in Buddhism, because when you look at pain really closely, it's actually it's two things. It's a strong sensation coupled with aversion to that sensation. So the kind of hatred of that sensation. And that's actually what pain is. Pain actually consists of those two components. And so the hatred of it, the aversion, which is normal. That's how we respond to physical pain. If you look at it really closely, you may be able to separate the two. See if you can see the aversion as one element, and then there's the physical sensation. And then the aversion, then it has all these stories that you're talking about that are also emotional, right? It's like, so you're describing and I don't mean to minimize, I'm not saying that to minimize it in any way, but it's like frustration, almost sounds like some guilt slash blame, right? And then I'm imagining there's probably a kind of, by now probably maybe a kind of hopelessness.
No,
It's probably really scared,
Yeah, very.
right? Of a feeling of like, oh fuck, like this is hopeless, like I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So those are actually emotional afflictions, which is actually good news because you can work with those. You know, that, and then what are you getting physical? You know, help for that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm getting everything I can.
Yeah, and it's not working.
I kind of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back
Mm-hmm.
type situation. So it's a slow, erratic improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Just enough to feel like, oh, sweet. And then, fuck, the next day I'm flat on my back. Like, God damn it, I shouldn't have opened that door with so much enthusiasm. Now I'm fucked. Yeah.
You know, we can talk more about this, between us, but
Sure.
I gotta tell you, this can actually be like a great practice
Awesome.
opportunity. I mean, these are the kinds of things.
I'll take it.
These are the kinds of things people get enlightened over. You know, there's like so many stories where it's that kind of thing where people were just suffering so much that that they sort of like ran out of options and then had to let go, like really had to learn to let go and change the whole relationship to the experience. So we'll talk more about it. I'd love to support you in it, but this could be really rich for you.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Michelle, you over it?
Well, there's 2 things. One is that how do you cope with the coming across as angry? You know, because a lot of times when you're in that place where everything feels bad, you're lashing out at everybody around you.
Mm.
And then if you feel so hopeless, also, you know, giving up can mean a lot of things. So, I don't want to go down that road.
You know, one thing that can be helpful is you can actually just tell people you feel really bad. And
Yeah.
it can save you from having to lash out at them. Or you could just say, like, look, I feel really bad. I'm really suffering right now. And, you know, and see how they respond to that. But it's interesting, I find that for that to be met, I find that the compassion that that's met with is really proportionate to how sincere and vulnerable the expression is. You know? Like if it's really like honest and we don't, you know, that's tough to do. It feels very vulnerable. But I find that when someone says it like that to me or I say it's so disarming. You know? It's so honest and non-blaming that it can really bring you closer to that person, and then there isn't the need to lash out.
Okay.
Give it a try. Anybody on this side of the room? In the back? I get some action from the back section. It's just that kind of night.
Maybe some chanting.
Hey, for the chanting, little chanting. We've only got, we don't have that much time left. That's
A little competition.
Yeah.
Just leaning up against the door. They don't realize we're in here.
For the people at home, are there people online?
Yeah.
I'm sure you can't hear what's happening. So there's been a bunch of noise all night outside, which the mic probably doesn't pick up. And there's been music playing and people knocking on the door. That's why we're all laughing. Are there any online questions? Anybody on there?
No, no questions so far.
Well, I'm glad it was so clear. And so impeccably taught that it was just crystal clear.
That's good.
Let's see. We've only got 5 minutes anyways, but so I guess we'll do some announcements. What's that? Oh, cool. Love a good question.
Hi.
Hi.
So I don't know if this counts or not, but I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
I generally hate crowds of people,
Mm-hmm.
especially parties where I don't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as an introvert in an extroverted society that I must socialize with people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so especially during the holidays, particularly New Year's Eve, there's always this feeling of not wanting to go anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
but also feeling like I should be going somewhere,
Mm.
because that's what everybody is supposed to be doing on New
Right.
Year's Eve. And I have finally come to a point where I can just say, I don't want to go. I don't feel like going. I will not have a good time. I am lying to myself if I pretend I will have a good time.
Great.
And it's a little tough to like really stick to that, because there's a certain sense of loneliness as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to my place of solace, which is my ceramic studio, I'm actually really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's there's a place of comfort and a place of peace
Mm-hmm.
there, and so I don't know if that counts, but
No, it counts. And actually, you know what you should do on New Year's? You should come here. We're having an intention setting ceremony from 7:30 to 10 on New Year's Eve. And so it'll be, maybe a crowd around this size, but we'll meditate and we'll chant and we'll do this intention setting ceremony. So it might be like a perfect middle path where you are out and you are with some people, but it's meditative and Buddhist in nature. Just to let you know, I'm glad. It sounds good. I think it's great. It's beautiful. You've understood who you are and what works for you. I'll tell you, you're in good company. The Buddha was an introvert. Did you know that? And get to you in a second. And the only thing I was thinking as you were saying that is, this whole idea of a middle path. And the way you're talking about it is like, well, I don't want to go to like parties where there's tons of people and then I'm alone. But then I'm a little lonely. And I'm wondering, what about going to something with just like 4 or 5 people? Does that feel different for you?
well, see, I work better on like one-on-one or like triads. Like I work better with smaller groups of people than I do with larger groups of people.
Right.
And I find that what makes me like really want to not be there is that is the large crowd of people all talking at the same time.
Yeah.
And so what you hear is just this clamoring of noise,
Yeah.
and it becomes really just jarring. Like I don't want to be here.
You know what? just because this might be interesting for you, how many people in this room feel that same way? Can you have a show of hands? So you guys should all get together. Anyways, but yeah, many Buddhists are, so welcome. You're in the right place. And I'm glad you know yourself and you have compassion and understanding for yourself and you do what works for you.
Oh, I was actually just going to follow up on that comment. I have 3 daughters. 2 of them could be characterized as fairly introvertish, and one is fairly extremely extroverted. And I think there's not just a personal second arrow, there's a social stigma in many situations about being introvert. And for kids, a kid who's introvert, there's a real social stigma. And that's like overtly, people will say, oh, come on, have fun, cheer up. It's like, please, let them be. So it's actually a fairly serious problem. And the fact that you recognize it, you've solved it for yourself, and now it's time for you to solve it, like you just did to some extent for other people.
Well, see, here, like, I do certain things like that where I would put myself out there, and so people will mistakenly believe that I am an extrovert. And it's like people don't, unless they like really, really pay attention, they can pick up that I'm really an introvert.
We will be closed the day before. And we also have a lot of really great classes and day-longs coming up in January. There are flyers over on the table, and we'd love to have you join us for some of them. The last thing, as a lot of you know, this center and our teachers are supported entirely by your generosity. So there's a Dana basket. Dana is the Pali term for generosity over on the front desk. And, part of what we really get to experience in Sangha is this kind of give and take. We get to experience the closeness and support of asking for help, of asking for guidance, of asking, for the support of the community. And then we also have the opportunity to offer support to the community. And so when folks are generous here with Dana, it means that not just that we keep the lights on, not that just that Jean can pay the toll to get across the bridge to go home, but it also means that we're able to offer scholarships for every single day long in class that we do. We've never turned anyone away for lack of funds, and that's because of you. So thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you. So just to finish up, bring your attention back to your body. Always do this very quick little ritual at the end where the dedication of merit. So just drop in and sense your body. May the merit generated by us coming together tonight as a Sangha, as a community, as a family, to support each other's practice, supporting each other and learning to be with difficult emotions and feelings with grace and compassion, practicing allowing ourselves and our experience to be the way it is. We dedicate and share this merit with beings everywhere. May we all be free. Thank you very much. And please be safe.